Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Huskers in Enemy Territory. Today I was going to do a top 10 um, Minnesota Vikings all time player list. The news today was kind of slow. I watched or at least listened to the Colorado Avalanche and Wild game, and honestly, you guys don't want to know my reaction to that game because the Avalanche lost eight goals to three, and I think it would be kind of a disheartening video to say the least. So I'm going to do tonight another top 10 with the Minnesota Vikings. I seem to have a lot of fun with it, so let's get to it. Number 11, I have 11 technically, so I couldn't leave this guy out. It was John Randall. Basically, he had like a motor that would never quit. The dude just, I don't know, like, I don't even think he probably didn't even drink coffee, honestly. It was before the sports drinks, all that good stuff, other than Gatorade. He just was a wild personality. I think everyone pretty much loved him. It was hard not to. Uh, you know, uh, he was definitely like one of my favorite Minnesota Vikings, other than maybe Chris Carter and Randy Moss. But what really stood out for him was he played defensive tackle, and he was an undrafted free agent. He didn't get drafted. It's insane. I can't believe that he didn't get drafted. But the fact was that I believe he came from a small school down in Texas, so that kind of like hurt his draft uh, like stock basically. And back in the day, a lot of the smaller schools you just never really got a lot of coverage like they do nowadays. Like ESPN shows the small schools a lot, so they have a little bit more of an advantage in terms of being able to be drafted. So that kind of hurt John Randall back in the day, but he was one of like a handful of maybe a handful of players to um, ever record eight consecutive double-digit sack totals, and I don't think that'll ever happen again. Honestly, being that he was an undrafted free agent, he was a seven-time Pro Bowler for the Vikings. He's still to this day the all-time sack leader for the Minnesota Vikings, and he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Those are just some of the notables. I'd like to go into more depth, but obviously I'm going to have to move on. Number 10 was Jim Marshall. He played 19 years in the NFL, which is insane, especially as a defensive end. He had the record until Brett Favre, and I'm not sure if Peyton Manning broke it, but at the time, Jim Marshall had 282 games consecutively played. Just insane as far as considering the fact that he was a defensive player. Uh, let's see here. Uh, oh, dang it. I put him in nine. Sorry. But whatever. Doesn't matter. You get the kind of the gist. Dang it. Uh, Sorry. Kind of got lost in the mix. But Yary actually was my 10th guy. So he played offensive tackle for the Minnesota Vikings. Uh, he was the first offensive tackle to ever be drafted number one out of USC. Let's see. He was a gifted run and pass blocker, seven-time Pro Bowler, and arguably the greatest offensive tackle to ever play for the Minnesota Vikings. That's saying a lot, I think. I mean, we've had some pretty good ones, Bryant McKinney, but I think probably if we look back on it, Ron Yary is probably the top guy. Uh, honestly, we haven't had too many good left offensive tackles. So Brian O'Neill might contend for the number one spot. Who knows? He's still young in his career, but Ron Yary, number 10. I already mentioned Jim Marshall as number 9. Unfortunately, I kind of screwed that all up, but let's move on to number 8. I had Chris Carter, top 10 or top 5 in receiving yards and touchdowns when he finally retired. Let's see. He was an 8-time Pro Bowler, Hall of Fame inductee, and probably hands down had the best hands of the NFL, and probably still to this day. I mean, there's a lot of guys that have some pretty good hands, but I don't know. Just like Chris Carter was on an entirely different level, in my opinion. Like it was always Chris Carter and Jerry Rice, kind of in the wide receiver who was the best, category back in those days. For number 7, I had Carl Eller, defensive end. Sacks, unofficially, they believe that he got 133.5 sacks. They and that was arguably, since they didn't record it back then, they had to like kind of go back and see what he might have had. So it's unofficial. But if it was official, he would be a top 10 all time pass rusher, which is pretty impressive. Uh, let's see. Had incredible speed and a long wingspan. 6-time Pro Bowler, Hall of Fame inductee, and one of the original Purple People Eaters, which was super cool. Number 6, Mick Tinglehoff, center, second on all-time games played. Let's see. 6-time Pro Bowler and basically did his job to perfection. Probably one of the greatest centers to ever play for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, of course, we had Matt Burke and a couple other guys, but Mick Tinglehoff, hopefully that's how you say his name, was probably one of the greatest. Number 5, I have Alan Page, defensive tackle, one of the original Purple People Eaters again. First defenders to ever win the NFL MVP in 1971. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler. Let's see. Oh, no, sorry. 9-time Pro Bowler and a Hall of Fame inductee. Moving on to number 4, I had Adrian Peterson, running back. He has the all-time rushing record for the Minnesota Vikings, around 8,800 yards rushing. Let's see, 5-time Pro Bowler and rushed for 2,097 yards in 1 year. I believe that year also against the Chargers, he had 295 yards in one game, which is insane and still a record to this day. And I still believe that if Brad Childress didn't take him out with, I don't know how much time left in that game, he probably would have had over 300 yards rushing in that game, which was absolutely insane. Number 3, I have Randall McDaniel. He played guard. He went to 12 straight Pro Bowls. I believe that's a record for any player. I don't think any player has had more than 12 consecutive Pro Bowls. And he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Apparently, like everyone kind of rips on his technique and the way he was in his stance, but I mean, he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and he got the job done. And honestly, if he was on the Minnesota Vikings, he'd probably be our best offensive lineman on the team. You know what I mean? So that's saying a lot. Not really saying much, considering we really only have one solid guy in Brian O'Neill, but Randall McDaniel, I remember him just always being a good football player. I have for number 2, Fran Tarkington. He played quarterback. held the all-time passing record at the time for a pretty significant amount of time. I don't think it was broken until Dan Marino, and I think it was in like I'm not sure what year it was, but it was in the '90s, and I think Fran Tarkenton stopped playing football in like the late '70s, so that's a pretty significant amount of time considering that the NFL wasn't too much of a passing league back when Fran Tarkenton was playing. So you would have to imagine what Fran Tarkenton would be able to do nowadays in a pass happy league. He was in a league that ran the ball the majority of the time. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler, NFL MVP, and I believe Tarkenton took the Vikings to 3 Super Bowls back in the '70s. I think the first one was I can't think of his name for some reason, but dang it, I can't think of his name. Sorry. Well, anyway, but moving on to number one, I have Randy Moss, wide receiver. His rookie year, he had 17 touchdowns and 1,300 yards receiving. Basically lit the NFL landscape on fire that year. It was almost like he was unstoppable, honestly. Uh, Finally, in 2020, a kid named Justin Jefferson finally broke his, not broke his, but Anton Bolden's receiving yards. But Justin Jefferson broke his rookie receiving yards total this year as a Viking. And, whatever. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler, all-time single season touchdown record. He also holds that, and he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I don't know, just the way he played the game. Sometimes he took plays off. Everyone knows that, but I mean, for me, Randy Moss is probably arguably the best Viking that has ever played for the Minnesota Vikings. I know that it might be a little controversial. People might have Fran Tarkenton as number one, but in my heart, I feel like Randy Moss was almost unstoppable, when he played for the Minnesota Vikings. Basically unguardable, And it was really sad when he was traded off to the Oakland Raiders. I was pretty mad about it, but it is what it is. And that's my top 10 Minnesota Vikings list. If you enjoyed that video, give me a thumbs up and a subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the bell notifications. And thank you for watching. And as always, go Big Red.